In the program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on budget expectations for service sector. The participants are Professor Aman Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, Ashok Dasgupta, and Aditi Fadnis, Business Standard, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
The economic survey last year had some really interesting facts about the growth of India's services sector. The economic survey said that India has the second fastest growing service sector, with its compound annual growth rate at 9%, just below China's at 10.9% during the last 11-year period from 2001 to 2012, and Russia at 5.4% was a distant third. Among the world's top 15 countries in terms of GDP, India ranked 10th in terms of overall GDP and 12th in terms of services GDP in 2012. The share of services in the world GDP was 65.9%, but its share in employment was only 44% in 2012. I think for a sector that contributes so much to the Indian economy, we need to fully understand what the services sector is. Mr. Dasgupta, if you could just explain what it is that the services sector encompasses and what are the things that come in the services sector.
For the benefit of listeners, the primary sector, as we call it, is agriculture and allied activities, including fishing. The secondary sector is manufacturing and allied activities, which means making production of a product. The rest all come under services sector, which is also called the tertiary sector. Now this then will include right from your e-tailing, e-commerce to telecom, service providers, communications, IT business, software development, IT-enabled services, banking, financial services, insurance, logistics, transportation, you name it, and everything comes under the service sector. So no wonder the contribution of this sector to our GDP is to the extent of something like 68% or so. But as you rightly pointed out, the employment potential is not commensurate to the GDP contribution that it has. Now, why is that so? Take IT sector, for example. India is the best at in the world is development of software. Now, this is a specialized activity in which you have the software experts sitting down and developing software. Obviously, it cannot produce employment like it should be there in manufacturing activity. Similarly, in logistics, a lot of it is done on the laptop. How the logistics will work in a certain thing, it is a chain of events which is developed on the laptop. So it is for this simple reason that the employment potential is much less, whereas its contribution to our GDP growth is very high. Now, it is exactly the opposite of, I would say, China. China manufacturing activity is huge. It is the manufacturer of low-end products to the almost entire world, and which is why it has tremendous employment potential.
Dr. Agarwal, if we were to take one by one, or the major elements that comprise the services sector, what is the top of the mind recall for you? What do you think is the most important element in the services sector?
Services, as rightly pointed out, includes large number of services leaving manufacturing and agriculture. But it does entail a large amount of employment because there are services like the hospitality, the tourism, which the Government of India is bringing under focus now, and tertiary services which are enabling various villages, doing large number of other peripheral activities, which are agriculture and manufacturing aided services as well. Now, amongst the top list services which are of matter of concern for the government and the nation, the hospitality, the hospitals, healthcare services, the education services, the transportation and infrastructure creation services. Now, these are some of the key areas which they're looking at. Apart from that, they're also now trying to focus on, because the industry has fairly well developed when it comes to IT. So they're not so concerned, except for in terms of creating certain kinds of rules and regulations to have a level playing field. They're not so much concerned about getting that industry grow much larger. But they're certainly looking at other sectors coming in. Fortunately, worldwide, whether it is international agencies like the United Nations or the World Bank, IMF or the IFC, which is part of the World Bank as well, does provide certain facilities, structures to enable countries enhance some of these services. And as we saw in the last 7-8 months of the current government's tenure, there has been visits and there has been some kind of notes which have been coming forth, and even funding which has been coming from different countries which the current government has been able to pool in to enable and enhance some of these services, which includes telecommunications as well. Power is one of the biggest services. Even the recent visit of the US President, it was one of the most debated issues. Now, these services are key areas, and I think there has been some stand taken. What is important, which is coming up as an issue before the government today, as a cause of concern for the public, is that there are indirect taxes on the services sector, which are actually accumulating to a good sum, which are troubling the common man today. I think this is one of the biggest agendas before the government in terms of taking up that if they want the services sector to grow up, if they want the facilities to grow further up, I think they will have to curtail on this new services sector tax which have been introduced by the previous 2 terms of the previous governments in an excessive manner, and which a common man is troubled not only because of inflation going up, but also because of these indirect taxes building on their expenses and disturbing the balance of their home budgets.
Mr. Dasgupta, if I could go to the outlier which has always been considered, which has actually taken India into new arenas of competition, which is IT. IT, as Dr. Agrawal pointed out, is the most important element in services sector. It leads growth, it leads India in the world. What are the biggest expectations the IT industry has from the government now in this budget?
Well, obviously, they will be looking for some sort of tax breaks or incentives. Let's say for software, development of software, they would like to have certain incentives which would promote development of software, research and development on new technologies, new innovations. All these things they'll be looking for. But along with software in the IT sector, the government by itself is also stressing on hardware development, which falls under manufacturing. Now, how much of a division, when you take the IT sector as a whole, would be there as far as incentives are concerned between software, which will come under services sector, and hardware, which will come under manufacturing, remains to be seen.
So that balance will have to be struck by the budget. But I think another balance that Dr. Agrawal hinted at was the issue of taxation of the traditional IT software development sector. There are a lot of problems in that arena. Maybe you could discuss some of them with us.
The indirect taxes, as he pointed out, and in the previous regime, year after year, had been including more and more services under that new tax. And right now, I think it is the second largest component as far as taxes are concerned. Now, which also goes on to show the development of our service industry in the country and its contribution to GDP. But that apart, as pointed out by Aman very correctly, indirect tax is a very harsh tax on the common man. And so, by far, it should be, as far as the government's revenue is concerned, it should come from direct taxes. Now, that's a different matter altogether because we need to widen the tax base and all those complications come into play. As far as indirect taxes are concerned, there is a demand from software developers and other sectors that they should be excluded from these indirect taxes. Now, the point is, the goods and services tax, which is going to be introduced, is slated for introduction by April 2016. And a lot of work has been done on it ever since 2010. Now it is in the sort of last mile that we are looking at. And there would be some announcement, I hope, in the budget on how the government wants to proceed on that. Now that unifies the excise and services tax together. So how the government will sort of restrict the play of GST on these sectors remains to be seen. I mean, they'll have to come out with some innovative idea to either reduce the rate for these certain sectors if it wants to promote growth of this sector. Otherwise, we'll have to wait till the budget. As of now, I mean, it's very difficult to predict what the government is likely to do.
Dr. Agarwal, if I may come to an area which is the most rapidly developing area in the IT-enabled services, this is e-commerce. E-commerce is developing at a rate which it could not be imagined by all of us. The e-commerce sector has some very specific problems with respect to government regulations. I know that Sachin Bansal and others who are pioneers in e-commerce are plagued every quarter by foreign exchange regulation violations which the government says they have committed, which they have to fight. This is only one of the problems. What are the other problems? There is a multiplicity of taxes. Many state governments do not recognize e-commerce as legitimate entities. So there are a lot of problems. How do you expect the budget to address these?
Most of these problems are operational problems and need to be addressed by the Reserve Bank of India directly and not by the government per se. As far as the problems which you mentioned, certainly there are cause of concerns with regard to the payment gateway system. I think there is aggressive work which is being done both by the government and the Reserve Bank in terms of trying to clear up this issue of the payment gateway which should be cleared. We still have functionality of some of the payment gateways which are already working in this country without the approval of the government, where people can actually use them for transactions and so on and so forth, which is a cause of concern primarily from the terrorism point of view and not from the point of view of taxation loss as of today for the government. And that's where they are still debating, and they want to have a clear-cut structure as to what kind of a payment gateway are we going to allow and which payment gateway are we going to allow. I think that will help resolve to some extent this problem. But as I said, it is more of an operational problem when it comes to, and I think the RBI needs to address this directly instead of the government worrying about it. One of the important components for the IT segment, the allied services as you mentioned, for the government today is, and it's a challenge for the government as well as for the sector, is that the ADB and the government has decided to go on a PPP mode for almost a decade now. And most of these funds which are coming from the overseas markets for the infrastructure, which includes IT and telecommunications, are supposed to be under the PPP mode, which includes that they need to have an Indian partner who helps them put it in place. With the e-governance and e-commerce to be there, I think the government needs to start developing appropriate relations with some of these IT companies and IT allied services to improve their functionality and to bring more efficient systems for a common man to breathe more comfortably. And I think this is something which is a matter of concern as to how fast they can do this kind of an activity so that it could ultimately benefit the common man in terms of reducing the cost, in terms of inducing competition and competitiveness. There is not sufficient appropriate competitiveness in the Indian industry as of today. Whatever the Indian IT industry is producing, 80 to 85% of it is for the overseas markets, whether it is neighboring countries, whether it is United States or Europe, whichever region we are looking at. And this has been the tradition for the last almost 15 to 20 years now for the IT industry when we talk of soft skills, the services sector. I think this is where there is a need of change, because India needs these kind of services to benefit its own people first and then outside. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. The banking interlocking with the IT services will help. We have a beautiful system of post offices in this country. It is unfortunate that the government has not been able to recognize the fact that we can actually combine some of these services, whether it is e-commerce or IT services or it is banking, with the post office system and reach the common man living in villages and provide them some of these best facilities and services which any citizen of the world is enjoying today. And I think the government needs to note on that. And this is at almost no cost, because the post offices have some experience of all these services which are prevalent but do not have an access to offer them in a larger scale. So I think this is where the government is challenged with, and the IT services need to work on, is bringing that healthy competition within its framework.
Mr. Dasgupta, we are looking at a mobile revolution, and e-commerce is increasingly being dovetailed to the mobile. What do you think will be the expectations of the telecom sector from this budget? It's not just mobile handsets and creating fabrication units. It's also trying to spread India's wings all over the world and tying up with other mobile companies in other countries and replicating the success of the mobile revolution in India across the world. If I were a telecom company owner, things I would be looking at, what can the government do to help me?
The telecom service providers are definitely looking for a lot of tax breaks. That is for sure. Now, in what form they would be remains to be seen. But first of all, I think what the telecom sector now needs, now there are too many players which have come in, and telecom is one sector which has grown exponentially, sort of without the government's assistance. The problem with the telecom is the issue of spectrum that is there. And because there is a shortage, we have these auctions and all that. And I do not want to get into that history of spectrum. The allocations auctions will take place very soon. First thing that I think the telecom industry would be looking for is easier norms for mergers and acquisitions, because that is a very major stumbling block, and any company which want to either tie up or acquire, it takes months together to really take it off the ground. So these norms need to be eased. Second thing is, when you talk about mobile applications, you can actually now, first we had the Jan Dhan Yojana, in which we have these banking accounts, and then the Reserve Bank will soon be coming out with the norms and procedures, etc., for the small payment banks. So this will sort of dovetail with the Jan Dhan Yojana scheme and the mobile application. A person in the village doesn't have to go to the branch to do his transaction. He can just download the mobile application and do it on his mobile itself. Now, to develop this, the government needs to provide incentives to these telecom companies. Now, again, in what sort of way it comes, we have to wait and watch. But the other thing that he talked about, e-commerce and e-tailing, how much the government does, we'll have to see, for the simple reason that there is a raging controversy between the retail shop outlets, which includes our malls, etc., which do not have any footfalls, and the e-tail business, e-commerce business, which is flourishing. Now, there's a huge difference between the two types of business for obvious reasons. A retail shop needs huge space to store his goods, display them well, have counter sales girls or boys. All these are there. A e-tailer merely needs just a go down a warehouse from where he just takes the order and supplies it, or merely acts as a sort of intermediate between the consumer and the manufacturer and connects the two. Now, obviously, there is much lesser cost involved in this sort of a business, and which is why the retailers are crying foul. So, in this environment, what the government actually does for this sector, again, we'll have to wait and watch.
This will be quite revolutionary, almost as revolutionary as trying to get another service out of the woods where it currently is, and that is construction. So what are the prospects you see for construction coming out of this morass of stagnation that it has fallen into?
Look, that again is for obvious reasons. If you look at our construction industry, wherein we mean the real estate developers as such, if you look at the residential sector in this, if you look at Delhi, you'll find almost every fifth house is being demolished and is being built anew. So that particular sub-segment is doing very well because the landlord there stands to gain. The developer there takes only maybe one floor and the landlord gets 3 floors along with some money. So sort of landscape of Delhi, especially in South Delhi, is changing very fast. If you come to the realty developers as such, their concentration till now has been on luxurious apartments. And that is one segment which has been languishing for obvious reasons. When you have an economic slowdown, there's not much money trickling in, at least officially, and so people do not go and buy or make investments. They'll wait for economic recovery to make an investment so that he gets a profit. What the real estate developer should get into and the government should provide incentives for is affordable homes, in which the person who is buying that particular apartment or flat actually lives there and does not buy it for investment. Now that segment has not developed at all because there's not much money involved. There's not much profit margin for the developers, and which is why the developers are going in for penthouses and luxurious apartments.
Dr. Agarwal, if I may bring you now to an area which the government has been consistently grappling with or sees itself as promoting, this is the creation of new cities, smart cities, which again will be dovetailed into the issue that you first mentioned, which is tourism and infrastructure development. The government has already announced 3 smart cities and many more are going to come up as cities which are planned, which will have combination of infrastructure development, of roads, of bridges, of ports, of shipping hubs, of railway hubs, and so on.
The government is focusing on smart cities, and the reality developers will come in play here, because the government authorities which were doing the job for almost over about 60-70 years after independence do not have the capacity to create those kind of cities at a fast pace. So they would need the combination of some of the reality developers and the telecommunication and the IT framework people to come in play. This will be one of the new opportunities which both the reality, the telecommunications and IT will look at when I said the government would like to come in. The second thing is, it's important to note that if you look at the reality worldwide and the way it has been growing in India, in the last 5 years, some of the Federal Reserve reports pointed out that the reality had gone down to almost about 84 to 85%. That means something which was $100 came down to only $12 or $13. In India, it did not even go down by a single paisa. So when it did not go down by a single paisa, that means it clearly shows that irrespective of who the reality developer it is, whether it is a government or a private one, whether it is luxury or necessity, there is excessive demand for that and there is sufficient money to flow for it. It's only a question of the benefit which all industries want to seek from the government at the time when budget comes in, and this is where we see all these roles coming up. I think it is a question of efficient management of resources, which most reality people have not been doing, because there was excessive money which the services class got in the 90s and the early 2000s, which they were flushing it into the industry, which is no longer available because the banks taking their hands off in the last 4-5 years, and the middle class also taking off their hand because of the inflation roar which came up. Now this is where they have got tight squeezed of not easily spending and creating whatever they wanted to create. And now they need to sit down and think, how do we work either with the government or otherwise to create more smart residential community places. And that's where I think the smart city concept comes in. I think we may see something which may come up as a buffer initiative for almost all these sectors, whether it is telecommunications, infrastructure, whether it is IT, to come in and play a role. The other day we saw in Delhi there was a talk about the Wi-Fi being available. Now that talks about the internet facilities, internet companies coming in, playing a role, more proactive role with the government to create that facility for the common man here. Now once we see this kind of move started taking place, we did see that happen almost a decade back in Pune, but it was not much of success. If we are able to make it successful, I think the common man will benefit, and we will see some of these smart city concepts coming up and all these sectors coming up in a much more flourishing way. I think the important component is the money is there with people. There is money with banks and financial institutions. The government is in the right direction. It is just a question of moving on to the takeoff phase for most of the projects which have been put in a stalemate for the last 5-6 months, because the current government was working on the previous government's budget structure, and now they will have a chance to design their own platform to work on and move forward with the country.
The worry about the real estate sector is always that there is unaccounted money flowing into this sector, which means that there could be a bubble growing there, and we've seen the way Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries have gone when they have relied excessively on real estate development and made that the centerpiece of their development. So how do you avoid that?
There is a little difference between what happened in 1997 in Asian financial crisis in India in specific, because in India, unaccounted money, which you talk about, referred to as black money as well at times, actually is owned by people at large in the country. In those East Asian economies, the money was coming in. These people, individuals were building up their own real estate. These are not specified companies only running these shows. They were running their own buildings, leasing them out, not selling them off to people. In India, most of the real estate, largely which is built, is actually sold to the consumer as against just leasing them out. And this is where, and most of the people who were takers in those countries at that time, so banks and financial institutions and corporations from all over the world, especially the US and Europe, coming in and leasing those facilities. In India, most of the consumers even today are the Indian inhabitants, whether it is from any state in the country. So they're coming in looking for businesses, opening up businesses and so on and so forth, whether it is for investment purposes, whether it is for the purpose of real work, they're doing it for that purpose. And so that's where the difference between Southeast Asia of 1997 and Indian real estate is.
Mr. Dasgupta, the problem which was faced by the civil aviation sector, which is also part of the services sector, a couple of years ago seems to have gone. And now there's a huge shakeout. Those airlines which were not efficient are dying, but place is being taken by newer airlines and capital is flowing into this sector, perhaps like it never has before. What is your outlook and what are the budget expectations from the civil aviation sector?
The civil aviation sector, if you look at it, as a business, it is a very difficult sector. That is, profits are very hard to come by because there are a lot of things that go into it. First, you need occupancy of your flights, then the price of your fixed costs, etc., the fuel, ATF prices, and then how efficiently you work out your routes. So it takes a lot of time for any airlines to really break even and then get into profits. And when our sector was opened up to the private sector, there were a lot of players who came in, and obviously we now have a shakeout. We had Kingfisher Airlines which got grounded. Then there was this problem with SpiceJet which has now gone back to the original owner, and he is trying to again 599 rupees, etc., so that he gets huge occupancy. Two new airlines that are coming in. Tatas are involved in this. Singapore Airlines, they wanted to partner. Finally, it has happened. They will be coming in. Now, obviously, there will be another shakeout because when these new airlines come in and compete, obviously the other airlines will tend to be bought over or will die down, like the Kingfisher way. The other thing is, where does the ATF prices rule? Right now, luckily, ATF prices are lower than diesel prices. Now, which again, it's a dichotomy because you have air passengers who are flying cheap, whereas the road transportation is still expensive. Now, that has to be worked out. The most important thing that needs to be looked at and in which the budget framework would depend is, where does Finance Minister Arun Jaitley peg his budget arithmetic as far as crude oil prices are concerned? The last budget, it was pegged at $110 a barrel. And now they have come down to $50-55 a barrel. For the new fiscal, where does he peg the per barrel crude? Does he peg it at 50, 60, 70? If he pegs it low and prices go up,
then economics goes completely awry.
Absolutely awry. And if he pegs it high, then it's all the better, because if the prices remain within that band, it's fine. Now, how the civil aviation industry works will depend largely on ATF prices, because on that would depend how many passengers per flight it gets. We have these cheap airlines right now, but how long can they continue with this cheap? Because this is just to attract customers.
But
this cannot continue for long.
Certainly, it's not sustainable, but don't you think that the tax component is also quite important, and that's where the government can come in?
That again will be a very sensitive thing, because if it is perceived that the government is giving undue tax break to the civil aviation sector, it will be resented by the common man who cannot fly.
So it's a very tight rope that the Finance Minister Arun Jaitley is going to walk. We are expecting the budget to address many of the issues, many of the expectations that the services sector has. And as the services sector is absolutely crucial for India's economy and growth, thank you very much for joining us in this program.
You are listening to a discussion on budget expectations for service sector. The participants were Professor Aman Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, Ashok Dasgupta, economist, and Aditi Phadnis, business standard, who initiated and moderated the discussion. It came to you in the program Current Affairs, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, news.air.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.